Debate this VAT tax with Erica Payne, founder of the Agenda Project, and Curtis Dubé from the Heritage Foundation. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Cheryl Casoni. Joining me for the hour to weigh in on all of this and more, Fox's Greg Jarrett. And David Bach is here once again, author of Start Over, Finish Rich. Will you finish rich, David, with a VAT tax? We're going to ask you in just a second. Our top story is this VAT tax, and is it a solution to the deficit problem or more trouble for our middle class in this country? Jerry Willis joining us with her VAT 101 primer. Jerry,
you're not going to like this, Cheryl. Okay, let me explain this VAT tax. First of all, the tax is on purchases. It's on consumption rather than income. So instead of seeing it in your paycheck, you'll see it at the cash register at your local store. And this creates a boatload of money for government folks to spend your money. Here's the translation. A 1% VAT tax equals $1 trillion worth of revenue over the course of a decade, or $100 billion in a single year. So it creates lots and lots of dough that people can use. Now, it's been a lot of talk about how this is used in a lot of Western-style democracies in Europe. That is absolutely true. In Germany, for example, the VAT tax 19%, some Scandinavian areas 25%, France and Italy 20%. Can you imagine this? There you are at the Revco or the Rite Aid trying to get a tube of toothpaste, and you pay 25% more just for those goods. Now, of course, there's a lot of reason people are talking about tax increases, and that's because over the next decade we'll face another $22 trillion in money that the government, you and I, owe out there, and we've got to try to find a way to pay for it. But there's real concern out here because the conversation is getting real serious in Washington about a VAT tax and what it would mean for individuals. Certainly, this would really hit the middle class. You know, conservatives oppose it because it is such a blank check. Liberals sometimes oppose it because it's regressive. Lower income folks pay more of their income on consumption, and it would hit them hardest.
I want to bring in Erica Payne and Curtis Dubé into this. And Erica, I mean, I think at the core issue of this discussion is, doesn't this, if it goes through, break the president's promise not to raise taxes on anyone that makes under $250,000 per year?
So let's start with two things. The first one is our tax system as it is doesn't make any sense. So corporations can deduct their private jets, but individuals can't deduct child care when they have to work for a living. So that's number one. Number two, not only does it not make sense, but it also doesn't cover the expenses that we have. So we've got a big problem in front of us, and the question is how to solve it.
But Erica, my question to you was, doesn't this break the president's promise not to raise taxes on the middle class? I mean, that's my core question here.
So the value-added tax doesn't add any more money to what the consumer pays. What it tries to do is cuts out the fraud in the middle of the business value chain by putting some pressure on all pieces of that value chain to pay a piece of the tax along the way.
Erica,
so what it basically does is it eliminates
nonsense.
the problem with an underground economy where people make income, drug dealers, etc., but they don't pay taxes on the drugs that they deal. But if they go to the grocery store and want to buy groceries, they would then have to pay taxes on that.
But Erica, here's the thing, and Curtis, I'm going to take this to you, and this is what Greg Jarrett is mentioning here on set as well, is that if you look at how the VAT tax and its effects financially work in Europe, for example, fraud is the biggest problem for the Europeans when it comes to the VAT tax, and it is on the business level. Erica says this gets rid of the fraud, gets rid of the problems. I think the Europeans beg to differ.
Right, there will still be a lot of fraud inherent in the VAT, but I think I need to correct one thing that Erica said. She said that this would not fall to consumers. That is just wrong. The value-added tax would be just like a national sales tax. We'd pay on everything that we buy. We're hearing rates as high as 20%. So everything we buy could be 20% more expensive because of the value-added tax.
Yep.
Now, we're looking at this massive tax increase. I think it was intentional to ramp up spending really quickly and by so much to get to this point where a VAT might be necessary.
Erica, can you name me one country that has a VAT tax in which it doesn't affect the consumers? Because every country that I know of, it directly affects the consumers. I don't know where you're coming from.
So the theory behind the VAT tax is that it spreads it across the value chain and it reduces fraud.
One country.
So that's number one. I don't know the specific countries that...
because there are none, Erica. It's a tax on consumers invariably.
It's actually
if you want to
not.
pay
And so let me
$8
ask
for
you a
chicken
question.
cutlets in Canada, go move to Canada, because that's what's happening with the VAT tax there.
It's also really a flat tax on buying things. tax.
Yes.
I mean, it's, people call VAT tax a flat tax.
People
it's not a
already
flat
pay
tax.
a tax on buying things.
But-
So the question
It's
is,
one
can you
extra
cut
flat tax.
down the fraud in between?
But
I think what we've got to focus on here is a single thing, which is we have a major problem in the country, and it's a deficit problem. And a big part of the deficit problem was caused by George Bush's presidency.
Okay,
so we had a tax cut we can't afford, we had a bailout we can't afford, and we had a war that we couldn't afford.
I don't want to do that with you this time, but I got to bring in, let's bring in Jerry Willis to kind of flesh out one of the points that you make, that it wouldn't be a tax on the consumer. I mean, it's a basic tax. Your bullet points, Jerry, pointed that out, that it's a basic tax on everything.
It's a tax on. It's a tax on everything. And what's sort of interesting that we're talking about here, your guest said that, we already have sales tax. That's right. That's another problem with this scheme, because states levy sales taxes. Now the federal government would be competing for that revenue, for those dollars. And that's going to create yet another problem, yet another conflict, I think, in our tax regime. But she makes a great point. We've got a big tax problem in this country. We've got big bills ahead, and we've got to figure out how to pay them.
And I think what's really important to clarify here. So one of your guests said that there's a 20% across the board. Let's be very clear. Number one, President Obama has not come out and said that he wants this value-added tax. What happened was one of his economic advisors said he thought it should be put on the table. And I think given the deficit situation that we have, we should have all options on the table. And in the same way that President Obama put drilling and nuclear power on the table to solve the energy problem.
It's also John Podesta has made this point.
One at a time, Jerry.
Well, John Podesta has asked for this as well. There's a lot of talk about this.
John Podesta runs a think
tank.
Hold
on, let Jerry respond, Erica.
I think there's more than just Paul Volcker saying this. It's been a conversation for many, many years. In fact, this has been raised for 20 years, the idea of having a VAT tax in this country. So it's nothing new on the table. It's an obvious thing for the Democrats to reach for now that we have spending that is completely out of control at the federal level.
And also, so let's start again. When did the spending go out of control? When did the spending go out of control? With a $1 trillion tax cut to a bunch of rich Americans who didn't need it.
No,
in contrast, Obama gave a tax cut to 95% of Americans. There's a choice that we have to make.
Erica, this president has done nothing but spend over the last 12 months. I mean, I think that if you look at just health care, just in general, that you can't dispute that. Curtis, you're being very quiet here, and that really troubles me, Curtis. But, I mean, please respond to what you're hearing here. I mean, do you think that we have to do a VAT tax, and is it the only way that we're going to get out of this deficit issue that we're all talking about here?
We absolutely do not have to do a value-added tax. A value-added tax is now being talked about because we've spent so much over the last few months, and we're planning to spend so much out into the future. We can avoid the value-added tax by not spending the money. We can not go along with President Obama's budget to spend trillions of dollars. We can repeal Obamacare and put in sensible, cost-effective reforms that will actually solve the problems that Obamacare sets out to solve. So that is not inevitable.
Not only that, Greg, but also remember that a lot of those Bush tax cuts expire. The ones that Erica's talking about expire this year. So it doesn't matter.
And the word repeal is a bit misleading. It doesn't happen just like that. You'd have to have a different president. And, you have to wait a long time for that because, you just don't have the numbers in Congress to repeal. You have to have the president's approval.
Right, you're right. And this would be up to Congress, Erica. You can't tell me that doesn't scare you just a little bit, that this is Congress that may push this through.
So, Cheryl, in my next life, I want to come back as a Republican because I can't wait to be in a party who thinks that you can lose weight, go on a diet, and take everything off the table, including eating your vegetables and exercising. The conservative right wing of the country was in control for 6 years.
Last time I checked, we've got a Democratic president and a Democratic-controlled Congress.
And so we now have to deal with it. Somebody else got us fat, and now we've got to go on a diet. And it's not very comfortable, but it's the truth of the matter.
That just doesn't make any sense.
Democrats and Republicans both like to eat, Erica, at the end of the day. And they both, both parties have shown that. I'm sorry, Curtis?
It just doesn't make any sense. We weren't talking about a VAT a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Now we are. Why is that? It's because all the spending that's happened over the last few months. Now that we're talking about a VAT to make up for to close the deficit that has been created since President Obama has come into office.
So you think the deficit came when President Obama came into office? So if you've forgotten $1 trillion war, $1 trillion tax cut, a $750 billion bailout of the banks, and a financial crisis that cost us $1 trillion also, I've got $4 trillion for you that we can hand directly to you.
I think that's a little bit off topic, David.
I just go back to the average American consumer, which is finally getting some confidence and finally saying they're going to go out and spend money. And right as they're doing that, we want to talk about another tax, a consumer tax. It's insane. Now, I told your producer, it really doesn't matter because it's not going to happen. But this conversation that's taking place right now doesn't make sense.
I didn't think Obamacare could happen, but it has. And I think it's no coincidence that the esteemed former chairman of the Fed, Paul Volcker, goes out and delivers what is clearly a trial balloon. The White House set him up to do that. And they're probably going to try to push this, and it could cause a double dip.
Great stuff, everybody. Spirited discussion. Great to have you all here. Erica Payne, good to see you as always, and Curtis Dubé.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And, of course, thank you to Jerry Willis as well for that great report.